Welcome to video number 4 on our High Performing Teams course, the change management of high performing teams. Somebody once said, change is inevitable apart from vending machines. But change is not inevitable in a high performing team. Change only happens if you collaborate with your colleagues in the team to make it happen. So let's look at how we go about bringing the change necessary to form a high-performing team. And we're going to start off with 10 general principles of change that we need to bring to the team. The first principle is never intervene blindly with somebody. If you don't know what's on the person's mind, if you don't really have a relationship with them, then your interventions with them are very likely to miss the mark. So you need to build information and build rapport before you start trying to do anything with a team member. Secondly, you need to make appropriate interventions. If somebody is hostile to the idea of a high-performing team and you leading it, then to ask them to be a champion for this change is probably not going to be very successful. You need to make appropriate interventions at the right time, and which makes sense given where the person is in terms of their attitude to what's happening. General best practice in change management is that you build on supporters and you try and make your supporters into champions. You build successful change around your supporters and you try and get them to commit. However, if you have a high profile opponent and you neglect them, they may well destroy your change program before it even gets off the ground. So build on your supporters, but don't neglect high power, high profile opponents to the change. It sounds obvious, but you must intervene with those you can influence. There's no point intervening with somebody who you have no influence over, and it may well be that they might well like you, but they're diametrically opposed to you on a particular topic and you have no influence on them. So in that case, you need to work with the people who you can influence, and they in turn may influence others. You can't maybe make as many interventions as you might want to make. So one of the principles is, if you've got to be selective on who you intervene with, it's a good idea to influence those who have influence over others, and then they'll bring people along. So that's one of the key skills in change management, working out the most influential people who you can build a change around. Don't neglect indirect interventions. You can intervene at a team level. You can intervene in all sorts of ways. You don't have to sit down one-to-one with an individual to make an intervention with them. And once you've got somebody on board and they're supporting you as a champion, please don't neglect them. They need to be supported, encouraged, and also taught new skills about being a change leader. Often at the start of a change management program, you will not see results on the dial that you can share with anybody. So that can make you nervous. But the key question is, am I doing the right thing? Even though I don't have results yet on my dashboard, am I doing the right thing? And if you keep asking yourself that, at some point the results will start to show. And finally, you need to be creative. A team is a living thing. This can't be a cookbook. You can't follow a prescriptive method. There's things you need to do that are not in the cookbook that might be highly effective. So these are 10 important change management principles that you need to apply to creating your high-performing team. So we looked at the integrated model of creating a high-performing team. In the previous video, we looked at the process development side. On this video, we're going to look at the change management side. Basically, how you go from insight and relationship through to understanding and influencing, through to commitment, and through to support and development with individuals on your team, not with your team as a whole. This is very much on an individual basis. So this is the change model with the 4 different stages. And just to make it come to life a bit, again, this is our business simulation game on change management, where you have adopted a team with 10 team members and you're now in charge of that team. And each team member has mixed views about the whole concept of you leading them in a high-performing team. So this is Karina, for example, and it shows here Karina. First of all, you have up here you have either no relationship or a bad relationship with Karina, so there's work to be done there. And also in terms of Karina's adoption level, she'd be red, so she'd be in the category of opponent. So you have to decide what kind of intervention would be appropriate for Karina. And you can look down the list and you see some of those interventions at the top of the list are very easy to do. Meet with the team member informally. That's a good way to build a relationship. Some of the other things further down the list require a lot more commitment. For example, if you met with Karina and you did the intervention 3 from the bottom, ask the team member to play a supporting team leadership role. You've no relationship yet with Karina and she's possibly an opponent to your change. That is not the right kind of intervention to make with Karina at this stage in the process. So you look at your team members, and one of the very useful tools you need to think about is a little tool called a stakeholder map. And it's basically a little grid. On one axis you have the attitude of the person to the change, which is the high-performing team, and they can be really one of 3 things: opponents, neutral, and supporters. Also, I'd put into neutral not yet decided, and with a bit of information they'll go one way or the other. So there's really 2 different types of neutrals, and then their influence, and this is really the influence they bring to bear on the other members of the team. So what you need to do now is, just by talking to your team members, talking to people who know them, reading on their bios, whatever you can, you need to place each of the team members somewhere on the stakeholder map. So in this example here, Karina, for example, she might have been in the team for a long time, so she might carry a lot of influence. So she'd be high on the influence axis. From what we've seen just looking at her profile, she doesn't sound like she's a supporter or even neutral on the change, so she might be an opponent. So you'd put Karina as an example in the top left quadrant. Now the other thing you can then do separate from this is say, what kind of relationship do I have with Karina? And if you thought you had a good relationship, then you could put a little green dot. So it's a very, very effective technique in terms of change management for working out where everybody is in terms of your team, who are the most influential, whether the supporters are opponents, and where your relationship is in terms of your ability to influence them. So that's all I want to say about the change management of high-performing teams. What we're going to look at next is closing the video course off with some leadership tips for creating high-performing teams.